So welcome again. In this lesson, we're going to talk about structures. What a structure is actually very similar to a class. And if you already know how to use classes, you can tell yourself that you already know how to use structs as well. So let's go into Xcode and see how we're going to do that. I'm going to go to Xcode. I'm going to start a new command line tool, Swift language, and I'm going to call it structs Swift. So in here, I'm going to go ahead in my main and say, do this. I have a struct, not like that, struct called user, and then it has a variable name, which happens to be a string, and a variable UID, which again happens to be a string. It feels very familiar, right? It's just like a class. I could also have an initializer, imp name, which is a string, and I could have imp UID, which is a string, and then I would say self.name becomes input name, and self.uid becomes input UID. Now, you might be wondering, well, this is kind of identical to a class, and why are we using this over the other one, or vice versa? Here are the two things that are different between them. First of all, structs cannot have inheritance. So a struct is like that child that gets left behind and nobody gives him anything. No inheritance. So if you try to make user a member of NSS string, it's actually going to give you an error saying that, hey, what are you trying to do? Structs cannot have subclassing, or they cannot inherit from anyone. That's part one. Part two, and this is a very important one. Part two, structs pass the value while classes pass the pointer or the memory location. Because of that, structs are a lot faster. Now, there's a lot of discussions online about which one is better and why you should use this one or the other one. I have my own really specific set of personal favorites, and I have actually included a link for you guys to a long discussion on a Stack Overflow, which I really recommend you guys at least try to skim through it, get some sense of what the guys are suggesting. But here is a rule of thumb for you. Use structs unless you need classes. So as long as you can get away with the structs, just use them. If you have a reason to use classes, then you must go for a class. The reason I started with classes, it's simply because classes are like a fundamental part of object-oriented programming, and we kind of needed to get started with those. But in practice, whatever you want to do, if you can use a struct for it, just use that. And you don't need to go for classes. But if you're doing something like our property listing application, that there has to be inheritance between different classes and objects, then you need to go with classes. Otherwise, for most everything, you can use structs, and structs are a lot faster. So with that in mind, once again, I really encourage you to read the post that I have in the description of this lesson, and let's move on.